A kid once told Richard Feynman that his father didn't teach him anything. The kid was wrong. Dead wrong. What Feynman's father taught him, in a backyard in Far Rockaway, with no textbook, no classroom, no degree, was the one thing that turned a uniform salesman's son into the most brilliant physicist of the 20th century. And it's the one thing schools still refuse to teach. Here's what happened. Richard is 8 or 9 years old, playing in a field with other boys after school. One of them points at a bird sitting on a fence post. "See that bird? What kind of bird is that?" Richard looks at it, shrugs, says he has no idea. The other kid smirks. "It's a brown-throated thrush. Your father doesn't teach you anything." But Richard didn't feel stupid. He smiled to himself, because his father had already taught him something that kid, and that kid's teachers, would never understand. Days earlier, his father had pointed at that same bird. He said, "You know what that bird is? It's a Spencer's warbler." Richard knew he was making the name up. Then his father kept going. "In Italian, it's a chuto lapitida. In Portuguese, it's a bom da peda. In Chinese, it's a chung long ta. In Japanese, it's a katano takeda." Then he stopped and said this: "You can know the name of that bird in all the languages of the world. And when you're finished, you'll know absolutely nothing about the bird. You'll only know about humans in different places and what they call it." Then he said, "So let's look at the bird." And he didn't stop there. He asked Richard, "Why does the bird peck at its feathers like that?" Then he explained, "Tiny flakes come off the feather. Lice eat those flakes. In the joints of the louse's legs, there's wax, and even tinier mites feed on that wax. Those mites don't digest well, so a sweet liquid comes out, and still tinier creatures live in that liquid." Feynman admitted years later, in What Do You Care What Other People Think?, that his father's facts probably weren't perfectly accurate. But the spirit was dead right. One bird, one question, and suddenly you're looking at a whole hidden chain of life that nobody notices, because they stopped at the name. The kid on the playground got an A. Feynman got a Nobel Prize. But the man who made that difference possible never got to be a scientist himself. His name was Melville Feynman. Born in Minsk, back when it was still the Russian Empire. His family came to America when he was 5. They settled on Long Island. Melville went to the local high school. Never went to college. Never got the chance. He wanted to be a scientist. That was his dream. But for a Jewish immigrant kid in early 1900s America, no money, no connections, no degree. That door was shut. So Melville went into business. The uniform business. He sold military uniforms for a living. But Melville had a plan. As Feynman later wrote in What Do You Care What Other People Think? Before Richard was even born, Melville told his wife, if it's a boy, he's going to be a scientist. Not, I'll push him into science. Not, he'll get into the best school. Melville's plan was different. He would teach his son to see the world the way a scientist sees it. Not through textbooks, through questions, through looking, through refusing to accept a name as an answer. And he started before the boy could even talk. When Richard was still small enough for a high chair, Melville brought home a bag of leftover bathroom tiles, different colors. He set them up on the tray like dominoes. Richard would push one end, watch them all fall, and laugh. They'd set them up again, and again. Then Melville started making patterns, 2 white tiles, 1 blue, 2 white, 1 blue, over and over. Richard's mother saw this and said, "Leave the poor child alone. If he wants to put a blue tile, let him put a blue tile." Melville refused. He said, "No. I want to show him what patterns are like and how interesting they are. It's a kind of elementary mathematics. No numbers, no formulas, no worksheet. Just colored tiles and a father who knew that mathematics is really just the art of noticing what repeats." It worked. When Richard got to kindergarten, The teacher sent a special letter home. The boy could predict woven patterns before he made them. Not because he was born smarter, because someone showed him where to look. Now, that's what Melville gave his son. Here's what schools gave everyone else. In 1966, Feynman gave an address to the National Science Teachers Association. He held up a children's science textbook. It had 4 pictures: a wind-up toy, a car, a boy on a bicycle. Under each picture, one question: what makes it go? He expected the book to explain how the spring works, how the engine burns fuel, how muscles move a bicycle. Real understanding. The textbook's answer? One word: energy. That's it. Energy makes it go. Label applied. Move to Chapter 4. Feynman said his father would have done the opposite. What makes the toy go? The spring. How did the spring get wound up? I wound it up. How did you get moving? From eating. Where does food come from? It grows. Why does it grow? Because the sun is shining. The textbook gave a word. His father gave a journey you could follow. And Feynman proposed a test. He said, without using the word energy, tell me what you know about the dog's motion. If you can't, you've learned a name, not a thing. Melville did the opposite, every single night. The Feynman family had a copy of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Melville would sit Richard on his lap and read to him from it. They read about dinosaurs, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and the book would say something like, this dinosaur is 25 feet high and its head is 6 feet across. Any other father reads that line and turns the page. Melville stopped. Let's see what that means, he'd say. If this dinosaur was standing in our front yard, it would be tall enough to put its head through our window upstairs. They lived on the 2nd floor. But its head would be too wide to fit through the window. 25 feet isn't a number anymore. It's a dinosaur staring into your bedroom. That's real. A child can feel that. Feynman caught what he called the same disease. Every physics paper, every equation, every government report. For the rest of his life, the first question was always, what does this actually look like? He learned that on his father's lap, not in any classroom. But Melville wasn't done. He was about to teach his son something even harder. How to be honest about what you don't know. One afternoon, young Richard was playing with a toy wagon, a little express wagon with a railing around it. He put a ball inside and started pulling, and he noticed something odd. When he pulled the wagon forward, the ball rolled to the back. When he stopped suddenly, the ball rolled to the front. He ran to his father. Pop, why does the ball do that? Now, a teacher would say one word. Inertia. Write it down. Test on Thursday. Done. Melville didn't do that. He explained the principle. Things that are moving tend to keep moving, and things that are still tend to stay still, unless something pushes them hard. Then he said 5 words that no school in the world will say to a child. Nobody knows why it's true. He gave the principle, and then admitted, honestly, that nobody actually understands why it works. That takes a kind of courage most teachers don't have, because the system doesn't reward honesty. It rewards answers. Even wrong ones, even empty ones, as long as they sound complete. But Melville wasn't finished. He said, look at it from the side. Richard ran back to the wagon, pulled it again, and from the side he saw his father was right. The ball didn't actually move backward. The ball stayed still. The wagon moved forward underneath it. What looked like the ball moving was really the wagon leaving the ball behind. 3 steps. Explain the principle. Admit what nobody knows. Then say, go see for yourself. Schools give you step 1 and skip the other 2. Melville gave all 3, every time. The bird story taught him how to see nature. The textbook lesson showed him how schools fail. The wagon taught him honesty. But the next lesson wasn't about science at all. It was about people, and why most of us never see them clearly. Melville used to show young Richard pictures in the newspaper. One day it was a photograph of the Pope, standing there while everyone around him bowed. Melville pointed at it and said, "Look at these humans. Here's one human standing here, and all these others are bowing. Now, what's the difference? This one is the Pope." He paused. "The difference is the hat he's wearing. If it was a general, the difference was the epaulets, the uniform, the costume. But take it off," Melville said, "and this man has the same problems as everybody else. He eats dinner. He goes to the bathroom. He's a human being, nothing more." And here's the part that makes this beautiful. Melville sold uniforms for a living. Every day he watched ordinary men put on a costume and become Sir, then take it off and become nobody again. He knew, from his own job, from watching it happen 1,000 times, that the uniform is just cloth. The bird's name, the textbook's answer, the Pope's hat. All uniforms. All the same trick. A label pretending to be understanding. So what happens when a boy raised like this walks into the most important room in the world? 1943, Los Alamos, New Mexico. Richard Feynman is 24 years old, youngest group leader at the most secret laboratory in history. And he's surrounded by the greatest physicists alive: Niels Bohr, Robert Oppenheimer, Hans Bethe. Names that carry more weight than almost any in the history of science. Every other young physicist in that building spoke carefully around these men, deferred to them, treated them like gods. Feynman didn't. He argued with Bohr, told him to his face when he thought an idea was wrong, pushed back on Oppenheimer's assumptions, said exactly what he thought to anyone, regardless of their title. And Bohr noticed. He started going to Feynman first, before anyone else, to test new ideas. Not because Feynman was the smartest person in the room, because he was the only one who didn't see the uniform. He saw the man, and he told the man the truth. That was Melville's lesson. The uniform salesman's son, treating a Nobel laureate like a human being in a room full of people who couldn't. If you've spent 20 years working, you've been in that room. One person who sees through the title, everyone else frozen. The difference isn't intelligence. It's what somebody taught them about uniforms. Or didn't. And if you're honest with yourself, you've probably nodded through a few of those moments too. Someone uses a word. You don't ask. You move on. We all do it. Next time, do what Melville taught his son. Ask, "Okay, but what does that actually look like?" You'll know in about 3 seconds who actually understands and who memorized a name. 1965, Richard Feynman wins the Nobel Prize in Physics, the biggest uniform in all of science. Reporters asked if his work deserved the prize. His answer, recorded in the BBC documentary The Pleasure of Finding Things Out, is one of the most remarkable things any Nobel laureate has ever said. "I don't believe in honors. Honors is epaulets. Honors is uniforms. My papa brought me up this way."
I don't like honors.
My papa. Not my education. Not my professors at MIT. Not my colleagues at Los Alamos. My papa. The uniform salesman from Minsk who never set foot in a university. He was standing on the biggest stage in science, and his first thought was his father. Because the medal was never the real thing. The medal was the label, and his father had spent 20 years teaching him that the label is never the thing. The real prize, the one Feynman actually cared about, was what he said next. The pleasure of finding the thing out. The kick in the discovery. The observation that other people use it. Those are the real things. Decades later, Feynman would walk into a university in Brazil and find an entire country of students who could name everything and understand nothing. But that's a different story. Melville Feynman died on October 8, 1946. Richard was 28. He'd already lost Arlene, his first wife, his first love, just a year before. Now the man who started everything was gone too. Richard couldn't do physics for a while after that. Couldn't think straight. The two people who shaped his world, both gone within a year. But the method didn't die with him. It lived in the Feynman Lectures, 3 volumes that millions of students still read today, 6 decades later. It lived in the Challenger investigation, when Feynman dropped an O-ring into a glass of ice water. Simple truth, louder than every bureaucrat in the room. It lived in every classroom where he stood at a chalkboard and refused, absolutely refused, to let a fancy word stand in for real understanding. Years later, reflecting on his childhood, Feynman wrote something in What Do You Care What Other People Think? That explains everything about who he became. I've been caught, so to speak, like someone who was given something wonderful when he was a child, and he's always